Created using Powtoon. Created using Powtoon.
Now let's talk about beam formation of an array. There are three basic components to produce beam, which are electric signal, element, and beam. Okay. Based on type of transducer array, linear and curvilinear array must activate a group of elements to form a beam, and phase and annular array must activate all type of elements to form a beam. Now we talk about the single element beam formation. For the single element beam formation, the elements are small and the transmit pattern is very broad and not very useful. For the array type of beam formation, the emerging sound beam is the sum of individual beam of each element. Therefore, it reinforces one another along common beam direction and cancel one another at another direction. Therefore, it will produce a well-defined narrow ultrasound beam, as shown in the diagram. Now we talk about the principle of transmit focus. This is the diagram of the transducer and the beam formed from the transducer. Firstly, all the elements are excited, but beam are not focused yet, like this. Next, the time delay introduced to pulse excitation to separate the element, like this. And then, the wavefront will converge toward the focal position to produce narrow beam over the focal region. This is the wavefront converge. This is the focal region, which known as transmit focal distance. Next, the focal distance can be varied by changing electronic delay sequence. Another features of array transducer is the multiple transmit focal zone, which are expanding the focal region of instrument, but the sound can only be focused at one depth at particular time. Therefore, the only way to make the multiple transmit focal zone is, from the diagram, we have 3 focal zone setup. When we combine the echo data from the 3 scan of beam, we can have that figures. Each scan pass with different transmit focal depth. For example, this is the scan 1, scan 2, and scan 3. During each scan, echo except only focal zone correspond to the transmit focal depth, and the resultant image will be has high lateral resolution, but it will also consume longer time.
We are going to talk on dynamic receive focusing. Whether it's linear or annular, the cross section is something like this. Let's assume this sign as the electrical pulse. Receive focusing is also known as dynamic receive focusing. Receive focusing is electronic focusing of the received echoes. Receive focusing is achieved by electronically delaying the returned signals depending on their depth. Time delays during receptions are applied to the electric signals from the transducer to the ultrasound system. This reception zone focusing relates to the depth of the returning echoes and optimizes image quality. In dynamic receive focusing, when the elements are excited, they create an electrical impulse that returns through multiple channels to the machine's receiver. Receive focusing is to improve image clarity. Phased array transducers are capable of both transmit and receive focusing. The dynamic receive focusing cannot be changed by the sonographer. It is controlled by the ultrasound machine. Hi, I'm Diveshni. So, right now we are going to learn about dynamic aperture. So, I'm sure y'all are thinking right now, how is dynamic aperture? So, to do that, let's start off by defining what is dynamic and what is aperture. So, dynamic is relating to forces producing motion. Aperture is the size of transducer surface involved in producing the ultrasound beam and detecting echoes for each beam line. So how about dynamic aperture? Dynamic aperture can be said as the size of transducer surface in motion involved in producing the ultrasound beam and detecting echoes for each beam line. Before we go further on the theoretical explanation on the dynamic aperture, let's first know the function of a transducer. Transducer has the ability to transmit and it has the ability to receive. So, during this receiving period is where dynamic aperture comes in. So, right now, assuming this is a transducer at receiving period, the dynamic aperture will function to achieve improved lateral resolution in an ultrasonic imaging system with a linear array of transducer elements, especially at ranges less than the full array aperture. The array aperture is increased as the range from which echoes are being received increases by effectively switching in more array elements by steps during every echo reception period. So right now there is only activation at the center element. Later on, there will be more elements tend to be activated as there are waves from the deep depth. The dynamic aperture control for best image quality is combined with dynamic focus control for adjusting time delays in the echo signal processing channels to focus the echoes at a plurality of focal points at different ranges. At longer ranges, several times the full array aperture, all of the array elements and echo processing channels are switched in or are active for the best realizable lateral resolution. The delayed echo signals from the varying number of active receiving channels are summed to generate the focused echo signal or raw video signal, which is displayed as a visual image